The foreclosure notice was printed on cheap yellow paper. The kind that felt like giving up had a texture. Rachel Chen stared at it, taped to her apartment door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock the deadbolt. 30 days. She had 30 days to come up with $8,400 in back rent, or she and her 10-year-old daughter Lily would be on the street. Again, she'd already sold everything worth selling. Her mother's jewelry, gone for $200. Her car. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Traded for a month's groceries and bus fare. Her wedding ring from the marriage that had imploded 3 years ago melted down for $85 at a pawn shop that smelled like desperation and broken promises. The apartment was barely habitable anyway. Mold crept up the bathroom walls like dark fingers. The heating hadn't worked since October, and it was now January in Seattle. The landlord had made it clear he didn't care about repairs, only rent. And Rachel, working 2 minimum-wage jobs, while her ex-husband lived in a waterfront condo with his new girlfriend, simply couldn't keep up. "Mama?" Lily's voice came from behind her, small and worried. "What's that paper?" Rachel crumpled the notice and forced a smile she didn't feel. "Just junk mail, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But Lily wasn't a child who could be easily fooled. At 10 years old, she'd already lived through the divorce, the evictions, the nights in their car before they found this place. She'd learned to read adult faces the way other kids read picture books, searching for signs of the next disaster. "We're not going to be homeless again, are we?" The question hit Rachel like a physical blow. She knelt down and pulled Lily close, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, strawberry shampoo from the dollar store. "No, baby. I promise. Mama's going to figure something out." It was a lie. Rachel had no idea how to figure this out. She was already working 55 hours a week between the coffee shop and the warehouse. There were no more hours to sell, no more things to pawn, no more options. That evening, after Lily fell asleep on the threadbare couch they'd found on the curb, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, the screen flickering because the battery was dying and she couldn't afford to replace it. She scrolled through job listings she wasn't qualified for, apartments she couldn't afford, and loan applications that required credit scores she'd destroyed years ago. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was another debt collector, but something made her swipe right. "Hello? Is this Rachel Chen?" A woman's voice. Professional, but not unkind. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Margaret Foster. I'm an attorney with Foster and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Theodore Chen." Rachel's breath caught. Her great-uncle Theodore, her grandmother's brother. She'd met him exactly twice in her life, both times at family gatherings where he'd sat in the corner, barely speaking, radiating the kind of loneliness that made people uncomfortable. He died 6 months ago, and Rachel had sent flowers she couldn't afford because it seemed like the right thing to do. "I'm sorry for your loss," Margaret continued, though her tone suggested this was a formality. "Mr. Chen named you in his will." Rachel's heart jumped stupidly. Maybe a few $100, maybe enough to buy them another month. "He's left you his cable car." Rachel blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "His cable car. It's one of the original San Francisco units from 1906, decommissioned in 1982. He purchased it at auction in 1985 and had it moved to a private lot in Georgetown. The property taxes have been paid through this year, and the vehicle is yours free and clear." A cable car. Not money, not a car she could drive. A massive, rusted, completely useless cable car. "Miss Chen, are you there?" "Yes, I'm." "Why would he leave me a cable car?" "I'm afraid I don't have that information. Mr. Chen was quite specific in his instructions. The car is yours. I have paperwork for you to sign. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Rachel wanted to laugh. She wanted to scream. Instead, she said, "Yes, I'll be there." She hung up and put her head in her hands. A cable car. What was she supposed to do with a cable car? The law office was in a building that smelled like old money and leather furniture. Margaret Foster was in her 60s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Rachel made in a month. She shook Rachel's hand with the kind of firmness that suggested she didn't have time for nonsense. "The car is located at 4800 Airport Way South," she said, sliding a folder across her mahogany desk. "It's in a secured lot. Here are the keys and the deed to the lot. It's about a quarter-acre, fenced, not suitable for development, but zoned commercial storage." Rachel opened the folder. Inside was a single key, old and brass, and a property deed showing her name as owner. "Can I sell it?" she asked bluntly. "The car or the lot?" Margaret's expression softened slightly. "You can try, but I should warn you, cable cars aren't exactly in high demand. Your uncle tried to sell it multiple times over the years. The scrap value is minimal, and moving it would cost more than you'd get. The lot might fetch a few thousand, but it's in an industrial area with limited access. A few thousand. It might buy them another few months." It wasn't enough, but it was something. Rachel signed the paperwork with hands that barely shook. She was getting good at signing things that represented her failures. The lot was exactly as depressing as she'd imagined. A cracked asphalt rectangle surrounded by chain-link fence topped with rusty barbed wire. Dead weeds pushed through every crack. And in the center, like a beached whale that had given up on the ocean, sat the cable car. It was bigger than she'd expected, about 30 feet long and 10 feet wide. The once bright red paint had faded to a dusty rust color. Windows were intact, but covered in grime. The wooden benches inside were visible through the dirt, sagging and water-damaged. The brass fittings that had probably gleamed in 1906 were now green with oxidation. Rachel stood at the fence, Lily beside her, and wanted to cry. "It's like a giant toy," Lily said, pressing her face against the chain link. "Can we go inside?" "I don't think that's a good idea, baby. It's probably not safe." But Lily was already squeezing through a gap in the fence that some vandal had created years ago. Rachel followed, heart hammering, ready to grab her daughter at the first sign of structural collapse. The cable car's door was locked, but the key Margaret had given her fit. The lock resisted, corroded by decades of neglect, but finally turned with a grinding screech. The smell hit them first, rust and rot and something chemical. The interior was worse than the exterior. The wooden floor was warped and water-stained. The benches were covered in bird droppings and what might have been raccoon nests. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of grime that turned to mud when Rachel touched it. "Why would great-great-uncle Theodore keep this?" Lily asked, running her finger through the dust on a window. "I have no idea, sweetheart." Rachel walked the length of the car, her footsteps echoing hollowly. The brass poles were still there, the ones passengers would have gripped while standing. The bell that had once announced stops hung silent and tarnished overhead. At the far end was what looked like a conductor's platform with a control mechanism that was frozen solid with rust. It was all completely, utterly worthless. She was about to tell Lily they needed to leave when her foot caught on something. A section of the floor felt different, looser. She knelt down and realized it wasn't rot. It was a panel, deliberately cut and fitted back into place. "Mama, what's that?" "I'm not sure." Rachel pulled at the panel. It came up easily, revealing a dark space beneath. She turned on her phone's flashlight and aimed it down. What she saw made her heart stop. The undercarriage wasn't empty. It wasn't filled with mechanical debris or animal nests. It was filled with metal boxes, If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Dozens of them, each about the size of a shoebox, stacked in neat rows that extended the full length of the cable car. "Mama?" Lily's voice was uncertain. Rachel reached down and pulled out the nearest box. It was heavy, made of steel with a combination lock. Her hands shook as she examined it. There were numbers scratched into the lid. The 15th of September 1985, the date her great-uncle had bought the cable car. She tried the combination, 091585. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in plastic and sealed with wax, were stacks of $100 bills. Crisp, new, more money than Rachel had ever seen in her life. She dropped the box. Bills scattered across the dirty floor. Lily gasped. Rachel grabbed another box. Same combination, same contents. Cash, another box. Gold coins, gleaming dully in the phone's light. Another. Bonds, government, securities. Her vision started to blur. Her breath came in short gasps. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. "Mama, are you okay?" Lily's small hand on her arm brought her back. Rachel looked at her daughter, then at the open floor panel, then at the dozens of boxes still hidden beneath the cable car. She did quick mental math based on what she could see. If each box contained even half of what the first one did. "Lily," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I need you to promise me something. We don't tell anyone about this. Not your friends, not your teachers, not even your father. This is our secret. Can you do that?" Lily nodded, eyes wide. Rachel's phone rang, making them both jump. "Unknown number," she answered, without thinking. "Miss Chen, my name is David Hartwell. I represent a group of investors who are very interested in acquiring your cable car." Rachel's blood turned to ice. "How did you get this number?" "Public records from the estate filing. I understand you just took possession today. My clients would like to make you an offer. Quite generous. $50,000 for the car and the lot." $50,000. Yesterday, that would have been life-changing. Today, with what she'd just discovered hidden beneath her feet, it was an insult that confirmed her worst fear. They knew. Somehow, they knew. "I'm not interested," she said. "Perhaps you should hear the full offer before declining. We could meet tomorrow, discuss terms." I said I'm not interested. She hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Who was that?" Lily asked. "Someone who wants to take this away from us." Rachel looked around the cable car with new eyes. Her great-uncle Theodore hadn't been a lonely eccentric keeping a useless relic. He'd been protecting something. And now, whether she wanted it or not, that protection had passed to her. She needed answers. She needed to understand what this was, where it came from, and who else knew about it. But first, she needed to secure it. They spent the next hour putting the boxes back, carefully arranging them exactly as they'd been. Rachel memorized the pattern, counted the boxes. 47 in total. If each contained even a fraction of what the first few did, she was looking at millions, tens of millions, maybe more. The panel went back into place, disguised by decades of grime and rot. To anyone who didn't know what to look for, it was just a broken floor in a derelict cable car. Outside, Rachel relocked the door and studied the lot. The fence needed reinforcing, the gate needed a better lock. She needed security cameras, motion sensors, every protection she could afford, which, she realized with a strange laugh, might actually be quite a lot now. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Rachel sat at her kitchen table with her dying laptop and researched Theodore Chen. She found almost nothing. He'd worked as an accountant for various firms in San Francisco in the 1000 970 seconds and 80 seconds. He'd never married, had no children, and had lived alone in a studio apartment in the Tenderloin until his death. His obituary was 3 lines long, but there had to be more. People didn't hide fortunes in cable cars for no reason. She searched for cable car 1906 San Francisco and found herself tumbling down a rabbit hole of history. The 1906 earthquake and fire had destroyed most of the city. In the chaos, millions of dollars had gone missing. Insurance companies, banks, wealthy families, all had reported losses. Most of it was never recovered. Rachel's skin prickled. Was that what this was? Money stolen over a century ago, hidden in a cable car, passed down through generations until it landed in her lap. Her phone rang again. Same unknown number as before. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Different number. Then again. And again. They weren't going to stop. Rachel turned off her phone and sat in the dark, listening to Lily breathe softly in the next room. She thought about the foreclosure notice, about the life they'd been living, about the impossibility of what she'd found. She thought about her great-uncle Theodore, alone for 30 years, protecting something he couldn't use and couldn't tell anyone about, dying with his secret, hoping someone in his family would be smart enough or desperate enough to find it. And she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would find out exactly what she'd inherited. She would learn the truth about the money, about Theodore, about everything, and then she would decide what to do with it. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Rachel Chen went to bed without fear. Because whatever came next, whatever battles she had to fight, she wasn't powerless anymore. She had $268 million hidden in a cable car, and she was going to find out why. The morning brought 3 more calls from unknown numbers before Rachel even got out of bed. She let them all go to voicemail. While Lily ate cereal, Rachel listened to the messages, her coffee going cold in her hands. Miss Chen, this is Robert Patterson from Heritage Acquisitions. We're prepared to offer $75,000. Rachel, my name is Susan Kim with Pacific Asset Management. I have clients who would pay generously. Miss Chen, I'm calling on behalf of the Theodore Chen Memorial Trust. It's imperative we speak immediately regarding property that may have been acquired under false pretenses. False pretenses. That last one made her stomach turn. She deleted all the messages and blocked the numbers. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She called in sick to both her jobs. Her supervisors weren't happy, but Rachel didn't care. She had bigger problems than disappointing a coffee shop manager and a warehouse foreman. After dropping Lily at school with strict instructions to talk to no one about yesterday, Rachel headed to the Seattle Public Library. She needed information, and she needed it from sources that couldn't be traced back to her. At a public computer terminal, she began to dig. Theodore Chen, born 1934 inches, San Francisco. Parents were Chinese immigrants who ran a laundry service. Theodore had been a brilliant student, won a scholarship to UC Berkeley, graduated with honors in accounting, worked for several firms before going independent in 1983, and then, in 1985, he'd bought a decommissioned cable car for $12,000 and moved it to Seattle. The auction records showed he'd outbid 3 other buyers, paying well over the expected price. Why? What had he known that others didn't? Rachel searched for San Francisco cable car history, filtering for anything around 1985. Most articles were about preservation efforts, tourism, the city's commitment to maintaining the historic system. But then she found something buried in a digitized newspaper archive from 1984. Missing Transit Authority funds raise questions. The article was brief. The San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency had reported a discrepancy in their accounts. During the decommissioning of several cable cars in the early 1982s, approximately $3.2 million in federal restoration funds had been allocated but never properly documented. An internal audit was ongoing. Rachel searched for follow-up articles. There was only one, 6 months later. Transit audit complete. No wrongdoing found. The investigation had concluded that the discrepancy was due to clerical errors and poor record-keeping during a period of administrative transition. No charges were filed. The matter was closed. But $3.2 million didn't just disappear because of clerical errors. Rachel sat back, her mind racing. Had Theodore been involved in the original theft? Had he known where the money was hidden and bought the cable car specifically to access it? Or had he discovered it by accident and decided to keep it? Either way, he'd protected it for 31 years. Protected it so well that when he died, he had almost nothing. His estate was valued at less than $50,000. Everything he owned, his clothes, his furniture, his books, sold for pennies. Everything except the cable car. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know what's in the car. Name your price." She deleted it immediately, her hands shaking. They knew. The question was how much they knew, and what they'd be willing to do to get it back. That afternoon, Rachel did something risky. She went to the lot. She'd borrowed a friend's car, taken a deliberately circuitous route, parked 3 blocks away, and approached on foot. The lot looked exactly as it had yesterday, but Rachel's skin prickled with the certainty that she was being watched. She unlocked the gate, slipped inside, and relocked it behind her. The cable car sat silent and still, keeping its secrets. Inside, Rachel went straight to the floor panel. She pulled it up and selected 5 boxes at random, carrying them to the conductor's platform where the light was better. She needed to know exactly what she was dealing with. The first box, $250,000 in $100 bills. Serial numbers non-sequential, dates ranging from 1982 to 1984. The second box, gold coins, American Eagles, Krugerrands, Canadian maple leafs. She counted 50 coins, each worth over $1,000 at current prices. The third box, bearer bonds, $500,000 worth, issued by the U.S. Treasury in 1983. The fourth box, more cash, $300,000. The fifth box, diamonds, loose stones in small plastic cases, each labeled with what looked like jeweler's grading information. Rachel did the math in her head. If the pattern held across all 47 boxes, she was looking at somewhere between $200 and $300 million. $268 million felt like a conservative estimate. She sat on the dusty floor, surrounded by more wealth than most people would see in 100 lifetimes, and tried to process what this meant. If this was the missing transit authority money, it had grown substantially. The original $3.2 million, hidden and accumulated with interest and additional deposits over 30 years, converted to gold and diamonds and bonds to preserve value. Theodore hadn't just stolen it. He'd managed it, protected it, made it grow. But why? If he'd wanted to use it, he could have lived like a king. Instead, he'd lived in poverty and died alone. Unless he'd been waiting for something. Or someone. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time she answered. "What do you want?" "Miss Chen." The voice was male, smooth, controlled. "I'm glad you finally decided to take my call. My name is Christopher Wade. I represent several parties with a legitimate interest in the property you've acquired." Legitimate interest. That's an interesting way to put it. "Miss Chen, I understand you're in a difficult financial situation. Single mother, facing eviction, working 2 jobs. This must all seem very overwhelming. The fact that he knew so much about her made Rachel's skin crawl. "What I'm overwhelmed by is the number of people calling to steal something that legally belongs to me. Nothing about that cable car is legal, Miss Chen. The assets it contains were acquired through fraud and embezzlement. They belong to the city and county of San Francisco, to the federal government, and to the taxpayers who were defrauded. You have no right to them. Then take me to court. We'd prefer to avoid that. Courts are expensive and unpredictable. They draw media attention. Surely you don't want reporters digging into your life, questioning your daughter, examining every financial transaction you've made." The threat was barely veiled. "Here's my counteroffer," Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You leave me alone, and I don't call the FBI and tell them about everyone who's been threatening me over supposedly stolen property. If this money is dirty, if it belongs to someone else, you should be thrilled I'm calling law enforcement. Unless, of course, you're not actually interested in justice." Silence on the other end. "You're making a mistake, Miss Chen. Probably. But it's my mistake to make." She hung up and immediately took the battery out of her phone. For the next 2 hours, Rachel systematically photographed every box, every bill, every bond, every diamond. She uploaded the images to 3 different cloud services, created encrypted backups, and sent copies to email addresses she'd never used before. If something happened to her, if someone tried to make this disappear, there would be proof, evidence that would raise questions even if she wasn't around to answer them. It was full dark by the time she finished. She'd replaced all the boxes exactly as she'd found them, secured the panel, and was preparing to leave when she heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Outside, the cable car. Rachel's heart hammered. She'd locked the gate. How had they gotten in? "I know you're in there." Christopher Wade's voice, no longer smooth, but hard as granite. "Come out. We just want to talk." Rachel looked around desperately. The cable car had 2 doors, both on the same side. There was no other exit. She was trapped. "Miss Chen, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We have a very generous offer. Enough to solve all your problems. You walk away comfortable. We handle the complications. Everyone wins." "What if I call the police?" Rachel shouted, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "The police are going to want to know why you have a cable car full of stolen money. They're going to want to know if you were involved in the original theft, if you've been laundering assets, if you've committed tax evasion. Your daughter will end up in foster care while you're being investigated. Is that what you want?" Lily. He was threatening Lily. Rachel's fear transformed into something colder, harder. She'd spent 3 years surviving David, surviving the divorce courts, surviving homelessness. She'd fought for every scrap of dignity she had left. She wasn't going to lose now. "The cable car is wired," she lied, her voice carrying through the darkness. "If anyone tries to break in, if anything happens to me, there's a dead man's switch that sends everything I've documented to every major news outlet in the country. Photos, serial numbers, your phone calls, all of it. Your generous offer becomes a very public scandal." More silence. She could almost hear them conferring outside. "You're bluffing. Try me." The footsteps retreated. Car doors slammed. Engines started. But Rachel knew they'd be back. She waited another 20 minutes before carefully opening the door. The lot was empty, but she could see where bolt cutters had been used on the gate lock. They'd come prepared. Rachel ran. She caught a bus 3 blocks away, changed buses twice, and didn't breathe easily until she was back in her apartment, with the door locked and every light on. Lily was at the neighbor's, safe, unknowing. Rachel had an hour before she needed to pick her up. An hour to figure out what to do next. The smart thing would be to walk away, give Wade what he wanted, take whatever money he offered, and disappear. Start over somewhere far away where no one knew about Theodore, or the cable car, or the fortune hidden underneath. But the smart thing felt like surrender. Rachel pulled out her laptop and started researching lawyers. Not local ones who might be compromised, but someone big, someone who specialized in whistleblower cases and asset recovery. Someone who'd see a cable car full of hidden money and think opportunity, not obstacle. She found her answer in a blog post about government fraud. A lawyer named Patricia Reeves, who'd taken on the Department of Defense and won, who'd recovered $400 million for taxpayers and earned a $40 million fee for herself. Someone who was smart, aggressive, and motivated by exactly the right things. Rachel composed an email, typing and deleting and retyping until she got it right. Miss Reeves, I have evidence of a 1-year-old fraud involving missing federal transportation funds, currently hidden in a decommissioned cable car in Seattle. The parties who committed the original theft are trying to recover the assets through intimidation and threats. I need representation. I'm willing to turn over everything to appropriate authorities if properly protected. Please call as soon as possible. She attached 3 of the photographs, enough to prove she was serious, and hit send. Then she sat in the dark and waited for someone to call who actually wanted to help rather than hurt. Someone who saw her not as an obstacle to be removed, but as a person who deserved justice. And somewhere, in the night, in a lot surrounded by chain-link fence, a cable car sat silent, keeping secrets that were about to explode across the country. Because Rachel Chen had made her choice. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was fighting back. Patricia Reeves called at 6:47 the next morning. Is this Rachel Chen? Yes. Rachel was already awake, had been for hours, watching the street from her window for any sign of Wade's people. I'm sitting in my office in San Francisco, looking at photographs of what appears to be approximately $75 million in untraceable currency and bearer bonds. Would you care to explain where you got these? Rachel told her everything. The inheritance, the cable car, the boxes, the phone calls, the threats against Lily. Patricia listened without interrupting, and Rachel could hear her typing notes in the background. Okay, Patricia said when Rachel finished. First thing, don't go back to that cable car. In fact, don't go anywhere near that lot. These people have already demonstrated they're willing to commit breaking and entering. Property crimes can escalate quickly. What do I do then? Just leave it there? No. We document everything, secure it legally, and then we use it as leverage. If this is truly the missing SFMTA funds from 1984, there are still federal claims on that money. But there are also whistleblower provisions that entitle you to a substantial percentage of whatever's recovered. Rachel's heart jumped. What's substantial? 15 to 30%, depending on how critical your information is to the recovery. If there's $268 million, you're looking at anywhere from $40 million to $80 million. The numbers were so large, they stopped meaning anything. Rachel had to sit down. But here's the thing, Patricia continued. To claim whistleblower protection, we need to prove you came by this information legally and reported it voluntarily. The fact that you inherited it helps. The fact that you're calling me instead of keeping it helps more. The fact that you've been threatened by people trying to suppress this information, that's actually ideal. Ideal? It proves consciousness of guilt. If this money was legitimately theirs, they'd have gone through proper legal channels. Instead, they're using intimidation. That tells me they know this is dirty money, and they're trying to recover it quietly. Rachel felt something loosen in her chest. Someone believed her. Someone was on her side. What do I need to do? Pack a bag. Get your daughter. I'm sending a car to pick you both up within the hour. You're coming to San Francisco, where I can protect you properly. We'll secure the cable car with proper security and legal injunctions. And then we're going to have a very interesting conversation with the FBI. What about my jobs? My apartment? Rachel, you're about to be a very wealthy woman. Your jobs won't matter. As for the apartment, I'm guessing you won't miss it much. Rachel looked around at the moldy walls, the broken heater, the foreclosure notice still sitting on her kitchen counter. No, she said. I really won't. The car Patricia sent was a black SUV with a driver who looked like he'd done security work for someone important. He helped Rachel load their few belongings while keeping a careful watch on the street. Lily, confused but excited by the adventure, clutched her stuffed elephant and asked questions Rachel couldn't answer yet. The flight to San Francisco was Rachel's first time on a plane in 10 years. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching Seattle disappear beneath the clouds, while Rachel tried to process everything that was happening. 24 hours ago, she'd been facing homelessness. Now she was flying first class to meet with one of the most powerful lawyers on the West Coast. The world could change that fast, for better or for worse. Patricia's office was in a glass tower in the financial district, all chrome and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Patricia herself was 50, black, impeccably dressed, and radiated the kind of confidence that came from winning cases everyone said were unwinnable. She shook Rachel's hand firmly, then knelt to Lily's level. You must be Lily. I have coloring books and snacks in the conference room. How do you feel about hanging out with my assistant Sarah while your mom and I talk? Lily looked at Rachel, who nodded. It's okay, baby. I'll be right here. Once Lily was settled, Patricia led Rachel into her office and closed the door. I've already filed preliminary documents with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, she said, pulling up files on her computer. You're officially a confidential informant in an ongoing federal investigation. That gives you protection under whistleblower statutes. Anyone who threatens you now is committing a federal crime. What about the people who've already threatened me? We'll deal with them. I've also arranged for security at the cable car lot. As of 2 hours ago, there are 3 armed guards and surveillance cameras covering every angle. Nothing goes in or out without documentation. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Patricia's expression softened. 20 years ago, I was you. Single mother, working 3 jobs, 1 bad month away from losing everything. I found evidence of contractor fraud at the military base where I cleaned offices. Everyone told me to keep my head down, not make waves. Instead, I reported it. That case launched my career and paid for my daughter's college education. So, this is about paying it forward. This is about justice and making sure that people who steal from taxpayers actually face consequences. Patricia pulled up a map on her screen. Now, let's talk about your uncle Theodore. Over the next several hours, Patricia and her team of investigators presented Rachel with what they'd uncovered in less than 24 hours. Theodore Chen had indeed been involved in the original theft. He'd been a junior accountant at the SFMTA in 1983, assigned to manage the federal restoration grant. Over the course of 18 months, he'd systematically diverted funds into shell accounts, converting them to cash, gold, and bearer bonds. The audit in 1984 had gotten close to exposing him, but his supervisor had taken the fall, and Theodore had quietly resigned. He'd bought the cable car because he knew its history. Car number 504 had been in an accident in 1981 and extensively rebuilt. During the rebuild, someone, probably Theodore himself, had modified the undercarriage to create hidden storage compartments. When the car was decommissioned, Theodore made sure he was the one who acquired it. But here's what investigators hadn't understood until now. Theodore had never spent a penny of the stolen money. His bank records showed he'd lived entirely on his modest accountant's salary, later on Social Security. He died with $3,000 $400 in his checking account. Why? Rachel asked. Why steal it if he was never going to use it? Patricia pulled out an old photograph. It showed a young Theodore standing in front of a hospital with a woman and a small child. His wife and daughter, Patricia explained. They died in 1986. House fire. The investigation ruled it accidental, but there were questions about the cause. Theodore became convinced it wasn't an accident, that someone had killed them to send him a message about the money. Rachel felt sick. Was he right? We may never know. But Theodore believed it for 31 years. He lived in hiding, protected the money he'd stolen because he thought spending it would make him a target. And when he got older, when he realized he was dying, he left it to the only family member he thought might understand. Me? Why me? Because you survived a divorce that should have destroyed you. You kept your daughter safe despite losing everything. Theodore's lawyer says he specifically researched your situation before writing his will. He saw in you what I see, someone strong enough to handle this. Rachel thought about her great-uncle, alone in his studio apartment, carrying the weight of his crime and his loss for 3 decades. Had he seen the cable car as penance, as protection, as a legacy? The FBI wants the money, Patricia said, but they also want the people who've been trying to intimidate you. Wade and his associates. We believe they're connected to the original theft, possibly the people who ordered Theodore's family killed. And if we help catch them, your whistleblower percentage goes to the maximum. 30% of recovered assets, plus immunity from any charges related to your uncle's theft. You'd walk away with approximately $80 million. Clear and legal. $80 million. Rachel thought about the foreclosure notice, about Lily's hand-me-down clothes, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering how they'd survive. When do we start? Patricia smiled. We already have. The FBI is setting up a sting operation. Wade thinks you're still in Seattle, vulnerable and scared. We're going to let him believe that a little longer. Meanwhile, we're going to very carefully inventory every single item in that cable car and build an airtight case. Over the next week, Rachel lived in a hotel suite paid for by Patricia's firm. FBI agents interviewed her for hours, documenting every phone call, every threat, every detail. Forensic accountants examined the contents of the cable car, cataloging serial numbers and tracing the money's journey through 3 decades of financial systems. The total came to $268.4 million. And Wade walked right into their trap. He'd arranged to meet with Rachel in Seattle, promising a final offer she couldn't refuse. Instead of Rachel, he found FBI agents and arrest warrants for conspiracy, extortion, and interstate threats. It turned out Christopher Wade was Theodore's old supervisor, the one who'd officially taken the fall for the missing money. He'd received a slap on the wrist and a forced resignation, but he'd known the whole time that Theodore had the actual cash. He'd spent 31 years trying to find it, trying to get Theodore to talk. The fire that killed Theodore's family hadn't been an accident. When Theodore died, Wade had thought the secret died with him, until the estate filing became public record and showed a cable car had been transferred to a relative. He'd killed 2 people and terrorized countless others, all for money he'd helped steal in the first place. The trial took 14 months. Rachel testified, calm and clear, about everything that had happened. Wade and 4 of his associates were convicted on multiple charges. The sentences ranged from 15 to 30 years. During those 14 months, Rachel and Lily lived in San Francisco in an apartment Patricia helped them find. Rachel didn't work, but she didn't sit idle either. She enrolled in community college, taking accounting classes, understanding for the first time what Theodore had actually done and how brilliant he'd been. The whistleblower reward was finalized at $82 million. Rachel Chen who 18 months earlier had been 30 days from homelessness, was now wealthier than she'd ever dreamed possible. The first thing she did was pay off every debt she had. The medical bills, the credit cards, the parking tickets. She paid her old landlord the back rent just to see the look on his face. The second thing she did was buy a house. Nothing ostentatious, but a real house with a yard where Lily could play, with heat that worked and walls that didn't grow mold. The third thing she did was set up a trust fund for Lily. Enough for college, for graduate school, for whatever future she wanted to build. But the fourth thing, the thing that mattered most, was the foundation. The Theodore Chen Memorial Fund was established to help single parents facing financial crisis. It paid rent for families facing eviction. It covered medical bills for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. It provided legal aid for people trapped in abusive situations by economic dependence. Rachel couldn't change the past. She couldn't bring back Theodore's family or undo the theft that had started everything. But she could take the money that had caused so much pain and transform it into something that prevented pain for others. The cable car itself became part of a museum exhibit about San Francisco history. Its hidden compartments displayed openly now, a cautionary tale about greed and consequence and unexpected redemption. On the 1-year anniversary of finding the money, Rachel and Lily visited the lot where it had all begun. It was empty now, just cracked asphalt and chain-link fence. Someone had put up a plaque. On this site, Theodore Chen protected a secret for 31 years, and Rachel Chen found the courage to bring truth to light. "Do you miss him?" Lily asked. "Great-uncle Theodore?" Rachel thought about the man she'd barely known, who died alone protecting a fortune he'd never used, waiting for someone strong enough to finish what he'd started. "I miss who he could have been," she said, "without the theft, without the fear, without the tragedy. But I'm grateful for what he left us. Not the money, but the lesson." "What lesson?" Rachel knelt beside her daughter. "That doing the right thing is hard. That justice sometimes takes decades. That one person's choices can ripple forward in ways they never imagine. Is that why you started the foundation?" "That's exactly why." They stood together in the empty lot as the sun set over Seattle, turning the sky the same rust-red color as the old cable car. Somewhere, Theodore Chen's ghost could rest easy, knowing the money that had cost him everything had finally found its purpose. And Rachel Chen, who'd started this journey terrified and broken, stood tall in the knowledge that she'd chosen the harder path and emerged stronger. The whistleblower who'd turned $268 million into justice for thousands. The single mother who'd proven that courage came in many forms. The woman who'd learned that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money at all, but the strength to do what's right, even when everything in you screams to run. 5 years later, the Theodore Chen Memorial Fund had helped over 12,000 families. Rachel sat on the board, using her accounting degree to manage the endowment Theodore's stolen money had created. She spoke at conferences about whistleblower protection, about the courage it takes to choose integrity over convenience. Lily was 15 now, volunteering at the foundation, talking about becoming a lawyer like Patricia. She'd grown up understanding that her comfortable life came with responsibility, that privilege meant protecting those who had less. The money lasted because Rachel was careful with it. She lived well but not extravagantly. She invested conservatively. She remembered too clearly what it felt like to be hungry, to be scared, to count pennies and pray they'd be enough. Some nights, when she couldn't sleep, she'd pull out the old photograph of Theodore with his wife and daughter. She'd think about the choice he'd made, the terrible bargain he'd struck with himself. Keep the money safe, live in poverty, die alone. But maybe, someday, someone would find it and do what he couldn't. Choose justice. Choose honesty. Choose the harder path that led to light instead of the easier path that led to darkness. He'd been right to wait for her. right to believe that somewhere in his family line was someone strong enough, desperate enough, and ethical enough to take dirty money and wash it clean through the simple act of telling the truth. Rachel Chen had been that person, and every family saved by the foundation, every child who didn't go to bed hungry, every parent who escaped homelessness because the foundation paid their rent, they were Theodore's redemption. The cable car that had hidden a fortune now sat in a museum, teaching visitors about San Francisco history, about human complexity, about the strange paths that lead to justice. And the woman who'd inherited it, who'd chosen truth over comfort and justice over wealth, she built a legacy that would outlast them all. Because that's what real wealth is. Not what you keep for yourself, but what you give away. Not what you hide, but what you reveal. Not the fortune you inherit, but the fortune you create for others through simple, stubborn, courageous integrity. Rachel Chen understood that now. And somewhere, she liked to think, Theodore Chen finally rested in peace. But peace, Rachel would discover, was never permanent when $268 million changed hands. Even justice, when it disturbed the right people, had a way of demanding a final reckoning. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning, 7 years after she'd first opened that cable car floor panel. Rachel was in the foundation office, reviewing grant applications, when her assistant, Sarah, buzzed through. "Rachel, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's about Theodore Chen." Rachel's stomach tightened. She'd learned to trust that instinct, the one that had kept her and Lily alive during the darkest days. "What's her name?" "Margaret Hastings. She says she's Theodore's daughter." The world tilted. Rachel gripped her desk. "That's impossible. Theodore's daughter died in 1986. That's what she said you'd say. She asked me to give you this." Sarah handed through the door a small object wrapped in tissue paper. Rachel unwrapped it with trembling fingers. Inside was a brass key, identical to the one Margaret Foster had given her 7 years ago, the one that had opened the cable car. But this one had something etched into the handle. Car 505. Rachel's blood went cold. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her late 40s, thin, with dark hair going grey at the temples and Theodore's eyes. Those unmistakable Chen eyes that Rachel saw in her own mirror, in Lily's face, in old photographs of her grandmother. "Hello, Rachel. I'm sorry to ambush you like this, but I've been watching from a distance for 7 years. I needed to be sure you were the right person before I approached." "You're supposed to be dead." Rachel's voice was flat. "I was supposed to be dead. The fire was meant to kill all of us, me, my mother, my father. But my father got me out. He told me to run, to hide, to never come back. I was 8 years old." Margaret sat down uninvited, her hands shaking slightly. "I became someone else. The foster system lost track of me. I changed my name, moved across the country, built a life, and I waited." Waited for what? For my father to finish what he started. For justice. For this. She gestured at the foundation office, at the walls covered with photographs of families they'd helped. "He wrote to me, you know, once a year, a letter to a P.O. box only I knew about. He told me everything. The money, the plan, you." Rachel felt like she was falling. "He knew about me? He planned for me to find it? Not specifically you. But he knew that, eventually, someone in the family would inherit the cable car. He hoped it would be someone good, someone strong enough to do what needed to be done. When he learned about what your ex-husband had done to you, when he saw how you'd fought to protect Lily despite losing everything, he knew you were the one. Why are you here now? Why not 7 years ago?" Margaret pulled out a folder, thick with documents. "Because car 504 wasn't the only cable car my father bought. He bought 2 of them. Car 504, which you found. and car 505. And car 505, Rachel, contains the real secret. Rachel's hands went numb. What do you mean? The real secret. The $268 million you found was everything my father stole from the SFMTA. But it wasn't everything he protected. In 1985, after my mother and I supposedly died, my father was approached by someone else, someone who'd also stolen money, but for very different reasons. Margaret opened the folder and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping from 1984. The headline read, "Activist Accountant Disappears After Exposing Defense Contractor Fraud." Her name was Jennifer Park. She worked for Hartwell Defense Systems. She discovered they were billing the government for missiles that were never built, charging for parts that didn't exist, pocketing hundreds of millions while delivering defective equipment to soldiers. Equipment that got people killed. Rachel read the article, her skin prickling. Jennifer Park had tried to report the fraud through proper channels. She'd been fired, blacklisted, threatened. When she'd continued pushing, her car had been bombed. She'd survived, barely, and gone into hiding. Jennifer had copies of everything, Margaret continued. Account numbers, correspondence, blueprints showing the defects. She had enough evidence to bring down not just Hartwell Defense, but dozens of government officials who'd taken bribes to look the other way. And she had the money she'd managed to recover, of $342 of million that she'd legally seized through bankruptcy proceedings before the company could hide it offshore. "Let me guess," Rachel said quietly. She asked Theodore to hide it. They found each other through the same networks people use when they're running from powerful enemies. Theodore had already perfected his system with the cable car. Jennifer had the money and the evidence, but nowhere to keep it safe. They made a deal. He'd protect everything until the time was right to expose it. In exchange, when the truth came out, the recovered money would go to the families of soldiers killed by defective equipment. And car 505 contains all of it. The money, the evidence, everything needed to bring down one of the largest defense contractors in American history. Jennifer died 15 years ago. Cancer. Still in hiding. Still waiting for justice. Before she died, she wrote my father a letter releasing him from his promise to protect her secret. She told him to find someone who could finish what she'd started. Margaret pulled out another document. This one, handwritten. Rachel recognized Theodore's shaky script. "He chose you, Rachel. Not just for car 504, but for this. The real test. The real legacy. Car 504 was proof that you had integrity, that you'd choose justice over personal wealth. Car 505 is the completion of that choice." Rachel's mind reeled. Another cable car, another fortune, another chance to do the right thing or walk away. Where is it? Storage facility in Oakland. Paid up for the next 100 years under a shell corporation. My father left me the location and the combination. I've been maintaining it. Waiting, watching to see what you do with what you found. And you, Rachel, you did exactly what he hoped. You turned dirty money into justice. You proved you could be trusted. Why not just go to the FBI yourself? Why involve me? Margaret's laugh was bitter. Because Hartwell Defense still exists. They're now Hartwell Security Solutions, one of the Pentagon's largest contractors. And the officials Jennifer tried to expose, some are dead, but many are still in power. Senators, generals, people who've spent 33 years making sure her evidence never surfaces. If I approach authorities, I'll be dead within a week. But you're already a famous whistleblower. You have legal protections, public support, Patricia Reeves, on your side. You have credibility I'll never have. You want me to do it again? Expose another conspiracy? Risk everything again? I'm asking you to finish what Jennifer and my father started, to give justice to families who've been waiting even longer than the SFMTA victims, to prove that even the most powerful people can't escape accountability forever." Rachel stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city. 7 years ago, she'd been terrified and desperate, backed into a corner with no choice but to fight. Now she had everything: security, respect, a life she'd built from the ashes of her old one. She thought about Lily, now 17, preparing for college, thought about the foundation, helping thousands, thought about the peaceful life she'd finally achieved. And then she thought about soldiers dying because contractors delivered defective equipment while pocketing millions. Thought about families destroyed by loss that never should have happened. Thought about Jennifer Park, who died in hiding after doing the right thing with no one to complete her work. "When can I see car 505? Margaret's shoulders sagged with relief. "Tomorrow. But Rachel, you need to understand what you're taking on. These people make Christopher Wade look like a small-time criminal. They have resources, connections, lawyers, politicians. They've killed before, and they'll kill again. Then we'd better be smarter than they are." Rachel called Patricia Reeves that night. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Patricia's response, after hearing everything, was characteristically direct. "This is either the stupidest thing you've ever considered or the most important. Possibly both. When do we see this cable car?" They met in Oakland 2 days later. Rachel, Patricia, Margaret, and a FBI team led by an agent named Kevin Torres, who'd worked the original Theodore Chen case. The storage facility was industrial and anonymous, one of hundreds of identical units. Margaret opened Unit 237, and there it was. Car 505, twin to the cable car that had changed Rachel's life. Identical red paint faded to rust, identical wooden benches, identical brass fittings. But when they opened the floor panel, what lay beneath took Rachel's breath away. The boxes were organized differently, color-coded and labeled. Blue boxes contained cash $187 million counted and catalogued. Red boxes held bearer bonds and treasury certificates. Green boxes contained gold and platinum. Yellow boxes held something more valuable than all of it combined: documents. Thousands of pages of internal Hartwell correspondence. Blueprints showing deliberate design flaws. Test results proving the company knew their equipment would fail. Communications with government officials arranging cover-ups. And in one special black box, a videotape. "Jennifer's insurance policy," Margaret said quietly. A recording of a meeting between Hartwell executives and Pentagon officials, discussing how to hide the defects and blame field conditions when soldiers died. It's dated 1983. Most of the people in that room are still alive. Agent Torres's hands shook as he lifted the tape. "Do you know what this means? We can bring charges against sitting senators, retired generals, executives who've been untouchable for decades. You can do more than that," Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "You can reopen investigations into every soldier death attributed to equipment failure between 1983 and 1990. You can give families answers about why their loved ones died, and the money, the recovered funds, that goes to those families as compensation." Rachel did the math in her head. $342 million distributed among the families of soldiers killed by faulty equipment. Even if there were hundreds of families, each would receive enough to acknowledge that their loss hadn't been forgotten, that justice, however delayed, had finally arrived. "What's my exposure?" Rachel asked. "Legal liability." "None," Patricia said firmly. "You're inheriting property and reporting its contents. The only people with criminal liability are the ones who committed the original fraud and tried to cover it up. What about the whistleblower reward? Potentially $100 million or more, depending on final recovered amounts and how critical your information is to the prosecution. $100 million on top of what she already had. Rachel could set up her daughter and her daughter's children for generations, could expand the foundation beyond anything she'd imagined, could live without ever worrying about money again. Or she could end up like Jennifer Park, running for her life, or like Theodore, dying alone after decades of fear. We need to move fast, Agent Torres said. Once we start seizing evidence, word will spread. We'll have maybe 72 hours before they start destroying records and coordinating stories. Then we move tonight, Patricia decided. Rachel, you need to get Lily somewhere safe, somewhere no one can find her. I'll take her, Margaret offered. I've been hiding for 40 years. I know how to disappear. Rachel looked at this woman, Theodore's daughter, the ghost who'd survived against all odds, family she'd never known she had. Why are you doing this? Why not just stay hidden? Because I'm tired of hiding. Because my mother died believing her husband was a criminal and her killer went free. Because I want my father's real legacy to be justice, not theft. And because, Margaret's voice cracked, I have lung cancer. Stage 4. I've got maybe 6 months. I want to spend them watching the people who destroyed my family face consequences. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Rachel whispered. Don't be. Help me finish this. Let me die, knowing it meant something. That night, Rachel sat with Lily in their kitchen, the same way they'd sat 7 years ago in a moldy apartment facing eviction. But everything was different now. They weren't desperate. They were choosing. I need you to go with Aunt Margaret for a little while, Rachel said. Lily had met Margaret only days before, but had instantly connected with this unexpected relative. How long? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe more. It's not safe here right now. Lily, 17, and sharper than Rachel had been at twice her age, studied her mother's face. This is about Uncle Theodore's other cable car, isn't it? The one Aunt Margaret told me about. Yes. Are you doing the right thing again? Even though it's dangerous? Rachel thought about all the conversations they'd had over the years about Theodore, about justice, about the foundation, about using privilege and resources to protect people who had less. I'm trying to, but this time, it's your choice too. You're old enough to have a say. If you want me to walk away to keep us safe, I will. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and hugged her mother tight. Grandma used to say the Chen family survived because we were stubborn enough to do hard things. I think Uncle Theodore was stubborn. I think you're stubborn. I guess I am too. Do what you need to do, Mom. Aunt Margaret and I will be fine. Rachel held her daughter and tried not to cry. When had her little girl become this brave, this wise? I love you more than anything in this world. I know. That's why I trust you. The operation moved with military precision. While Rachel and Patricia filed whistleblower complaints and turned over evidence, FBI teams executed search warrants at Hartwell Security Solutions offices in 7 states. They seized servers, arrested executives, froze accounts. The media explosion was immediate and massive. Largest defense contractor fraud in U.S. history exposed. Decades of cover-up unraveled by whistleblower. 3-4-year-old evidence brings down Pentagon officials. Rachel watched it unfold from a secure location, Patricia beside her, as the dominoes began to fall. 3 senators resigned within 48 hours. A retired 4-star general was arrested at his home in Virginia. Hartwell's stock plummeted 90% in one day. And the death threats started. They came through email, through phone calls, through messages left at the foundation office, detailed descriptions of what they'd do to Rachel, to Lily, to anyone Rachel loved. Federal marshals were assigned to protect her 24/7. "This is what Jennifer Park lived with," Patricia said grimly. "This is why she died in hiding." "I'm not hiding," Rachel said. "They want me afraid. They want me to regret this. I'm going to testify at every trial. I'm going to make sure every family knows what happened to their loved ones. I'm going to watch every single one of them go to prison. That's assuming we survive long enough to get to trial." Rachel thought about Theodore, who'd survived decades of fear, about Margaret, dying of cancer but determined to see justice first, about Jennifer Park, who'd given everything and died without seeing her work completed. "We'll survive. We have to." The trials took 3 years. Rachel testified at 17 different proceedings. She watched senators, generals, and executives try to explain away the evidence, watched them blame underlings, claim ignorance, argue that times were different back then, and she watched juries, one after another, find them guilty. Hartwell Security Solutions was dissolved, its assets liquidated. The recovered funds totaled $487 million after decades of growth in hidden accounts. Combined with penalties and fines, the total reached $1.2 billion. The whistleblower reward was calculated at $122 million, but more important than the money were the letters. Rachel received thousands of them from families of soldiers who died using defective Hartwell equipment. Families who'd been told their loved ones had made mistakes, hadn't followed procedures, were somehow at fault for their own deaths. Now they knew the truth. The equipment had been designed to fail, and their loved ones had been sacrificed for profit. "Thank you for giving us answers," one mother wrote. "Thank you for making sure my son's death wasn't forgotten or covered up. Thank you for proving he was a hero, not a failure." Rachel framed that letter and hung it in her office, next to a photograph of Theodore and Margaret from when Margaret was a child, both smiling, both unaware of the tragedy that would reshape their lives. Margaret lived long enough to see the first convictions. She died peacefully in hospice, with Rachel and Lily beside her, holding the letter Jennifer Park had written to Theodore, releasing him from his promise. "Tell my father I kept the faith," Margaret whispered. "Tell him we finished it." "I'll tell him," Rachel promised. Every day. With Margaret's share of the inheritance and Rachel's combined whistleblower rewards, the Theodore Chen Memorial Fund expanded into the Chen Park Justice Foundation. It helped military families navigate VA claims, supported whistleblowers facing retaliation, provided legal aid for people exposing fraud, and it kept the cable cars, both of them, Car 504 and Car 505, were donated to a new museum dedicated to whistleblower history. They sat side by side, their hidden compartments open, displaying the empty spaces where fortunes had been concealed and justice had waited. Plaques told the stories. Theodore Chen, who'd stolen money but protected it for justice. Jennifer Park, who died in hiding fighting contractor fraud. Margaret Hastings, who'd survived death to complete her father's work. And Rachel Chen, who'd chosen integrity over comfort, not once, but twice. Lily, now 21 and in law school, sometimes gave tours of the exhibit. She'd tell visitors about her great-great-uncle, about the morning her mother found the first cable car's secrets, about the choice Rachel made to expose rather than exploit. "People ask if we're rich," Lily would say. "And we are, but not because of what we kept. We're rich because of what we gave away. Because money that could have stayed hidden became justice for thousands of people. That's the real Chen family legacy." 10 years after opening the first cable car, Rachel stood at the museum on the anniversary of Theodore's death. The foundation had helped over 100,000 families. The Hartwell prosecutions had led to reforms in defense contractor oversight. 3 more whistleblowers had come forward in other cases, inspired by Rachel's example. She thought about the scared woman who'd opened a floor panel in a rusty cable car, expecting scrap metal, and finding $268 million instead. Thought about how easy it would have been to take the money and run, to give Lily the comfortable life they'd never had. She'd chosen differently, and that choice had rippled forward in ways she never could have imagined. Patricia Reeves found her standing there, both of them older now, grey threading through their hair. "Any regrets?" Patricia asked. Rachel thought about the death threats, the trials, the years of fear and uncertainty. Thought about Margaret dying too young, about Theodore's wasted decades, about all the pain the money had caused. Then she thought about the families who'd received justice, the whistleblowers who'd been protected, the systems that had been reformed because someone had been brave enough to speak up. "None," Rachel said. "Not a single one. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance wasn't money or property, or even justice itself. It was the knowledge that one person, standing at a crossroads between comfort and integrity, could choose the harder path and change the world. Theodore had chosen it, dying alone to protect his secret. Jennifer had chosen it, living in hiding and dying without vindication. Margaret had chosen it, spending her last months ensuring the truth came out. And Rachel had chosen it, not once but twice, proving that courage could be inherited just like money, passed down through generations until someone was strong enough to carry it all the way to the end. The cable cars sat silent in their museum, monuments to the extraordinary things ordinary people could do when they refused to let injustice win. And somewhere, Rachel liked to think, Theodore and Jennifer and Margaret watched from whatever came after, finally at peace knowing their stubborn, impossible faith in human goodness had been justified. The Chen family had kept the faith, and the world was better for it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.